Hey everyone, and how's it going? I'm here visiting Six Flags America here in Bowie, Maryland during its last days. In fact, just last week it has switched to weekend-only operations. It's just before Labor Day though, so this does mean the park should be operating at full capacity. Obviously, if you look behind me, you will see that's not the case. So I'm here at Six Flags America, and on November 2nd of this year, 2025, it will close for good after just over 25 years in operation. With the closure coming, took my son to see what kind of fun could be had and to give it a proper goodbye. As we entered the park, I was glad to see that we weren't the only ones trying to give this park a proper send-off. Upon entering the park, we act like it's 1776 with its old America-themed shops and restaurants. You could go a number of places from here. My son suggested the nearby Firebird Rollercoaster, so off we went. We see it from afar, and I'm excited because it would be the first time I would get to try out many of these rides, having previously come here as a chaperone only. We enter the Chesapeake region with its themes of pirates and seafaring, and get on the Firebird in little to no time. This roller coaster is famous for the burst of flame near the end, which of course I failed to capture. Next, again at my son's suggestion, we aim for the Skywinder in Steamtown. It's a little bit of a walk there, and on the way there we see a couple early signs that the park was not living in its glory days, with many games and vendor stands left unmanned. Furthermore, this park's version of the log flume, which in my opinion is an essential to any amusement park, was not operating. This worried us a bit, but once we got to Steamtown, we were glad to see everything in operation. My guess is Steamtown is supposed to represent the Rust Belt as the hardy region that never gives up, and I guess today it lived up to that reputation. To my surprise, I see a ride operating which had recently made the news. So this ride behind me made news just a couple weeks ago because about 30 riders got stuck and it needed Prince George's Fire and Rescue to come and get them off of it. However, it is in operation now, so that's pretty good. Anyways, this twisted hunk of metal is the Skywinder, and much like the Firebird, there was virtually no wait. While fun, unless you do wait for the very front of the coaster, you can't really see anything besides the seat in front of you, and me, I like visuals. I also found that for this kind of ride, the G-forces hit you right in, the gentleman's region. So, it was alright, but not my favorite. Our next stop was the Quantum Canyon Rapids, right next to the Skywinder, where my son and I encountered our very first wait. Another amusement park staple, it's the ride where you get wet with strangers in a bouncy boat. This one was dinosaur themed, and the unpredictable nature of it while getting unexpectedly yet expectedly wet, it was so far my favorite. As we left Steamtown, we saw Tweety and Sylvester being escorted out by security for some reason, although this would make more sense later. We pass the auditorium and see a Western-themed show already in progress and decide to sit down. And while watching Justin Timberlake's body double perform, this is where I'll say that you would never know that this park was closing by the actions of the employees. The performers were energetic, and all the staff we encountered were enthusiastic and determined to give the guests a good experience. So, a sincere thanks to all of the staff for continuing to bring their A-game. Back in Chesapeake, our next ride was the Roar roller coaster, where we got good views of the attractions to come, and where there was virtually no wait to get on, yet again. It was built in 1998, which is relatively new when it comes to wooden coasters, and I have to say this was by far the roughest and most uncomfortable wooden coaster I've ever ridden, and I know my wooden coasters. After making a reminder to call my chiropractor, we decide on what to do next. One benefit of this park's America theme is that pretty much anything goes, and I guess a licensing deal was made somewhere, and that's how we found ourselves in Gotham City. This was a lot more lively as all the game and food vendors were open. We were rushing to the very popular Joker Jinx, and hey, what a surprise, there was very little wait. I'm sure there's a specific name for this type of coaster, but it's one of those that accelerate you really fast at the beginning and then do the loops and such without needing a big drop. It was a lot of fun. The ride operator kept giving phony countdowns, surprising the riders, and I was glad there was at least a little bit of theater with this ride. Following that, it was time for a break.
My son and I shared this $24 burger, which I have to admit isn't the worst deal in terms of amusement parks.
Now, I have to be honest, I'm not an expert on this park, as the first time I came here in its current iteration was only a few years ago. Although that was not my first time here, because this was not always Six Flags America. In fact, I first knew of this park as Wild World, and I imagine this was the first amusement park millennials like me from the DC area visited, because it was, at least to me, seen as the starter amusement park. So as a result, it was great for smaller kids trying to graduate from the county fair. It was the kind of place you'd go if you sold enough Cal Ripken Jr. bars in the fundraiser, hoping to sit next to your crush on the bus ride there. Really, the wild one behind me is the only reminder that this used to be Wild World. Of course, nowadays, that's kind of seen as a little bit elementary, as there were no looping coasters at the time. And indeed, it must have been the business sentiment, because Wild World was purchased in 1993 and then became Adventure World, as the park tried to compete with more parks in the area offering bigger thrills. In fact, this area would see its first looping coaster and feature rides such as the Mind Eraser, which as a 90s kid was highly appealing. This was the day and age where my classmates, for instance, would espouse the benefits of exciting pastimes such as huffing paint thinner. So having your mind erased, it was marketing genius. And while I did go to Adventure World once, I had by this point shot well past the 48 and in some cases 56-inch thresholds needed for ultimate thrill rides. I specifically remember waiting to do rides like Days of Thunder at King's Dominion and the Loch Ness Monster at Busch Gardens. But again, it seemed the business world felt the need to compete, because this park would once again be sold off, this time to Six Flags in 1998, which is how it remained for just over 25 years now.
After lunch, we take a walk to check out the rest of Gotham City and see major sections of the park closed off. The pavilions were closed, the Penguin's Blizzard River was not operating, and neither were both of the most famous rides of this park, Superman's Ride of Steel and the Batwing. We were sort of expecting this, but it is irritating that Six Flags themselves made no effort to communicate what was operating versus not. We only anticipated the closures based on word of mouth from one of my son's classmates who had a season pass. I was a bit sad that I would never get a chance to ride these, but I have to take the majority of the blame. I moved back to the DC area in 2009 and certainly had plenty of time to check it out, but didn't. With the knowledge that major sections of Gotham City were out, we chose to do the Wonder Woman Lasso of Truth. At 242 feet, it's the tallest ride in the entire park. It's a fairly tame swing ride, and one where we waited for just over half an hour, our longest wait so far. For some reason, hundreds of spotted lanternflies were attracted to the base of this ride and were flying at people's heads. Eventually, we got on and enjoyed great views of the park and the surrounding forest. We saw Harley Quinn's Spinsanity operating, a very high pendulum-style ride, but we opted not to ride it and decided to leave Gotham City for Mardi Gras. Obviously, this was themed after New Orleans and is the home to the aforementioned Wild One. By the way, the Wild One happens to be the oldest roller coaster in any Six Flags park. It's been operating here in Maryland since 1984 as the flagship ride to Wild World, but it came here by way of Massachusetts, where it was originally built way back in 1917, where it was known as the Great Coaster. Maybe I was biased by nostalgia, but it was my personal favorite ride and a prime example of the old-timers getting it right, since this was thrilling and smooth in terms of wooden coasters. As there was very little wait, we immediately rode it again before deciding to finally go to the Hurricane Harbor Water Park. On the way there, the Sylvester and Tweety sightings were explained as we passed through the Looney Tunes Toontown. This section is reserved for the smaller kiddos. In fact, many of the attractions had a height limit prohibiting bigger kids from entering. As we arrived at Hurricane Harbor, we discovered it was an additional $10 each at the gate, which was a bit irritating. We were pleased, though, to see that all but one of the water rides was open and operating. As a budding YouTuber, one has to be pretty shameless filming in public, but even I couldn't bring myself to film in a water park, so please enjoy this copyright-free footage instead. If you'd like to help me become big enough so that I could film in a water park with impunity, please subscribe and help me get to my goal of 1,000 subscribers. I know YouTube puts ads on my videos anyways, so with 1,000 subscribers I can finally get paid a little bit for it. Anyways, my son and I weren't having quite as much fun as these people here, but it was a fun time and we were able to do absolutely every water slide available, many of them multiple times, as well as the wave pool. In fact, we kind of lost track of time because by the time we got out, the sun was already starting to set. With a little under 2 hours till the park closed, we were looking for things to do and decided to go back to Mardi Gras to do the Ragin Cajun. We skipped it before because the line was too long, but now the line was even longer. I was at Hershey Park earlier this summer, and even there, I noticed that the biggest lines belong to the medium thrill rides like this one, instead of the tallest, fastest rides like when I was younger. It made me realize that there existed a true generational shift. Young people no longer wanted their minds erased, they were much more into vibing. At first I wanted to shake my fist at the clouds, wondering what happened to today's youth, but who knows, maybe more risk-adverse and less self-destructive behavior is a good thing. Only time can really tell. Anyways, it took about 45 minutes to finally get on, our longest wait so far, but it was a fun ride. From there, we did a bit of a role reversal as my son doesn't do drop towers, but I do, so he waited for me while I did the voodoo drop, and as the sun was really coming down, we literally started running to get as much done as possible, doing the Joker Jinx 2 more times before ending our day back in Steamtown to get a front row seat this time to the Skywinder, getting on the ride 1 minute before the 8 p.m. closing time.
And so Six Flags closes right before Labor Day. Earlier this year, I was at Hershey Park, only about an hour more further away from here, and I have to say it was a lot better, at least 3 times better. So with area competition, King's Dominion, the aforementioned Hershey Park, Dutch Wonderland for the smaller kids, and Busch Gardens Williamsburg. However, in the end, it's simple math that makes this park close because in the end, this land is more valuable than it is running an amusement park. As the DC metro area gets more and more popular, living space is always in short supply. And much like Lake Forest Mall, whose downfall I covered in a previous video, the rumor mill has it that this land will turn into residential housing. And that's a shame. The internet has been great, however, not without fault, as one of the biggest downsides of how connected we are online is that we lack togetherness in person. A contributing factor is the continuing decline of third spaces like this one. Places besides homes and workspaces where people can just hang out and enjoy each other's company with all the little bits that make human interaction so interesting and beneficial, like seeing the subtle changes in facial expressions when we're thrown into, for example, fits of laughter. And in some respects, a lot of the blame has to do with capitalism itself. With such a large population in this area and one with a relatively large income, the ability to turn a profit becomes the biggest priority for any business and landowner. Speaking of capitalism, the decision to close this park came last summer in 2024 once the parent company of Six Flags merged with another amusement park giant, Cedar Fair, who deemed this park either unprofitable or not profitable enough. And I was going to say that this park would close with a whimper rather than a bang, but objectively I can't say that because I had a blast here today. All right, and so we're leaving Six Flags. Personally, I'm hoping this place gets bought and continued as an amusement park in some form because this space has been dedicated to entertainment before even its amusement park days. Over 50 years ago, before this was even an amusement park, it was a wildlife preserve before eventually turning into a place with rides. But me, I hope it stays a badly needed third place. A place where young Americans in the area can have some of their firsts. First field trips, crushes, kisses, all of that shit.
And so we leave Six Flags for the last time with the hope that this won't be our last time here, and that this land continues as a venue for entertainment with its new owners like it has been for the past 50 years and counting. And even though objectively it's not the best park, I always have a great time coming here, especially since we spend very little time waiting and could do our favorite rides over and over again. That to me made it well worth the price of admission, so fingers crossed we get to come here again in the future, but for now, goodbye and thanks so much for watching.